Hello and welcome back to 3 Point Range. Our tens and tens of listeners are well aware of how much we value the concept of load management on this podcast.
Oh Lord.
And after our lavish 100th episode, we thought we needed to maybe take a day or two off to refresh. Well, 9 months later, here we are, right back to where we were, refreshed and ready to go. So it's 3 Point Range 2.0, I guess you could say. And I'm the professor, Tim Crothers, and you'll notice right away that the host of our first 100 episodes, Mike, the journalist, decided to take the corporate severance package, and he's moved on to greener pastures, Irish green, I guess you could say, and I can't say that I blame him. Mike will no doubt, in my mind, go down in 3 Point Range as in 3 Point Range lore as our Pete Best. Does anyone know who Pete Best is?
I do.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Who's Pete Best?
Original drummer for the Beatles.
Right. He's the fifth Beatle. And I suspect that, when we go viral, which could happen any day now, that Mike will go down as Pete Best. I was kind of hoping, Kimball, that you didn't know who that is because I was going to make that our very first ding if I had come up with no responses, but
Does that make me Ringo Starr?
oh my gosh, you've completely scooped me. Well done.
My bad.
Well done.
My bad.
No, that's good.
Okay. We'll get into it.
That's a good sign that you're already one step ahead of me. But yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. We were talking the other day about how we have Kimball the scout and I'm the professor, and we needed your handle, your 3 Point Range handle, and we couldn't really come up with anything. So up until we figure out something better, you're Ringo.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about our newest member, whose voice you just heard for the first time, taking over Mike's figurative seat in this fabulous Curtis Media Center studios here in Chapel Hill, is the newest member of our team, Shelby Swanson. And Shelby brings two elements to the podcast that are desperately needed: a female voice and youth. These two things are the things that we were so desperately in need of for the first 100 episodes. We finally figured it out that's what our problem was. That's why we haven't yet gone viral. And she also meets the other requirement for being a 3 Point Range host, and that is that she has had a byline in the Daily Tarheel. That's the only way you're allowed to be part of our gang here. Is you have to have been a writer for the Daily Tarheel here at UNC. Shelby's bylines are considerably more recent than Kimball's and I, which will become painfully obvious as we move forward here. But anyway, so maybe I think we can bring our listeners in and let them think about what might be the best handle for Shelby long term. Maybe because Kimball's the scout and Shelby is a young and upcoming phenom in the journalism world. Maybe she could be the prospect. I don't know.
Okay, prospect. I like that.
You like that?
I like that. Yeah.
Anyway, weigh in on our voluminous social media platforms if you have any ideas for what you think would
Comment
be best.
down below.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, without further ado, I hear that we're going to throw Shelby in the dunk tank first, just to get her ready to go. So, welcome to 3 Point Range, Shelby, and go ahead and shoot your shot.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on the pod. And I'll just go ahead and jump into my first points, if you will. Very exciting stuff. Just a little bit about me and my background. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is just player-journalist relationships and building that bond and getting to know players off the court. And there was a recent incident with a player by the name of Joel Embiid, 76ers, where some of his personal life kind of came into the public light, not in the most, how should I put this, appropriate sense in my opinion, but we'll get into it. Obviously, the Sixers season, the start to it has already been tumultuous. Joel Embiid's at the center of that chaos just with the absence due to lingering knee issues. It's fueled a lot of criticism, which has been worsened by both his silence on the matter, but also a recent encounter with journalist Marcus Hayes, writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And the tension essentially stems from fans and critics just growing impatience with that being Embiid's inconsistent availability and failure just to lead the team to a championship despite all his talents. But I think that Marcus Hayes in his column took things a little bit too far, and this is the specific section of his column that he has since corrected and updated, but I'm going to read it for you guys just for context for listeners that have not read this. So he wrote, Joel Embiid consistently points to the birth of his son Arthur as the major inflection point in his basketball career. He often says that he wants to be great to leave a legacy for the boy named after his little brother, who tragically died in an automobile accident when Embiid was in his first year as a 76er. Well, in order to be great at your job, you first have to show up for work. Embiid has been great at just the opposite. Now in his 11th season, he consistently has been in poor condition. His poor conditioning apparently seems to have delayed his debut this season. Embiid won't play in Wednesday's opener the next 2 games. And as a result, recently it was widely reported that in a post-game locker room availability, there was a scuffle between Embiid and Hayes. And I'm not going to go too much into the details of that because the reporting, I think, at first was a little bit, more inflamed about, oh, this was an assault, and later it seems like it might have just been a light shove, so I don't really know what
Shockingly, there was
went on there.
no video of it. How in the world we live in was there no video of this? I did a little looking around before we started, and I thought, how is that possible? This kind of stuff always turns up on video.
I don't even know how, because interestingly, in more Philadelphia sports news, I don't know if you guys saw the clip of Jason Kelsey, was it, just slamming the, quote unquote fan's phone for basically throwing this homophobic slur at his brother. And there were, 50 angles of that thing, but nothing with Embiid. Anyways, that's a little bit of preface, but getting to my point on this is I think a lot of this honestly stems from limited media access and a lack of clear communication. Ultimately, with Embiid, there's been very limited transparency about his injury, unclear timelines, inconsistent information from the 76ers. I mean, the NBA is even, I believe, fined the 76ers just for that purpose. And I think when athletes are unavailable or just outright avoid the media, it leaves room for speculation, and reporters can get frustrated, sometimes even overstep. And I'm not at all saying that this justifies Hayes' points here, and I still think that it was just completely crossing the line to bring into the, column for argument's sake, this player's deceased brother, his son. But that being said, I think a lot of the root cause of this just tension is from the team side and their inability to explain Embiid's load management, the inability for Embiid or the team to just come out and say that he's injured. He's clearly injured. And because of that, there's a lot of frustration. Embiid is facing criticism from all angles, media, fans, things like that. And somebody, throwing your family in there will cause you to snap. But anyways, I'll toss it over to you guys. I want to get y'all's thoughts on this, but my point ultimately being that this didn't come out of nowhere. I don't think that Marcus Hayes just woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm going to disparage the 76ers stars, family and everything. I think a lot of it comes from just this tension and a breakdown in the 76ers inability to just be transparent about injuries. And we've seen it widespread across college sports, professional sports. You can't call anything a surgery now. It's an operation. You can't, say that somebody's, I don't know, somebody has shin splints. It's just lower body injury. And because of that, I think there's just so much tension, and ultimately things like this can happen, or just misinformation due to ultimately the team and the organization's inability to just have clear communication.
Well, Shelby, good job. I think this is great that, we do have a young journalist on pod now to dive deeper into some of these things. I am a retired journalist, so I've
Sort of,
lost
yeah.
my
So,
way, yeah, in with so many of these issues. But I also know that part of your homework before taking on the role of our third wheel is you had to go and listen to all 101 of our former podcasts, and you might know that in episode 47, no, I don't know which one it was, but we touched on this. We've touched on this a few times, and I want to ask you. We've touched on the obligation on both sides, right? The obligation in sports for it goes two ways. Journalists have to be respectful, and and they have their rules, and the teams and players have to like provide some access. If they expect coverage, and I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. And so I just want to kind of open it up to your thoughts, especially what's going on lately. One of the things I wrote about and a long time ago and podcasting about here was I always thought it was kind of antiquated, this idea of, people talk a lot about women going to the locker room. Well, I said, well, no one should go into the locker room. It's this crazy idea that we go in there and these people are, it's their home, they're changing, they're showering, they're in states of undress. And I said, no, there should be more of like a rule that like, and also players sometimes don't want to talk to the media or they hide from the media. And I said, no, part of your job description, part of your job is to have some access to the media. So I was saying like, I don't know what the period would be, but there's like a 20-minute period where you're not allowed to shower, you're not allowed to change. You have to be available to the media. You can say no comment. No one's going to force you to spill your guts, but you have to be available. And likewise, we say, okay, that's when the media can be in there. And then maybe there's like a 20-minute period where they are free, media leaves. Maybe they can come back later for a more extensive thing once everyone's had the chance to change. What are your thoughts on that as you're kind of touching on these themes with your point?
yeah, I mean, and your point being just specifically that kind of dead period for media availability in a locker room.
Well, I think it will open up the expectation. Like, no, part of your job is to be available to the media.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, when I used to cover it, like, if a guy had a bad game, he might hide out in the training room, which was off limits. So, it was a way to just say, like, I'm not going to talk to you guys, and you could wait 2 hours for the guy, something like that, and they would just duck. And again, no one forces someone to like comment. You can say no comment, but at least you have to present yourself to the media. And it's sort of like this bond, like, hey, we owe each other this, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25. I don't know what the time period is. I don't know about the exact logistics, but I mean, don't you think that would solve a lot of this in terms of just like, hey, you have to be available. You have to give us some answers. And then if you expect us to not, go out and do what this journalist did, which is kind of like, it seems like to bring up his family, I thought was inappropriate, but also it sounds like he didn't really know the facts, necessarily of Embiid's injury, and partly, as you're saying, because he didn't have them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think it's a great idea. I think also it would really help in terms of just general comfort level, just to have some sort of, let's call it I don't know, 15-minute media window. There's just an
Right.
expectation of, hey, especially if it's, like men coming into like a women's locker room or vice versa. I definitely would feel more comfortable if I knew like guaranteed I'm going to go in there for 15 minutes and nobody's going to be like changing or getting out of the showers, like I would appreciate that. But yeah, I think that's would certainly help. The issue would be though whether or not just how much the respective leagues would enforce it with fines, things like that, because I can definitely see a lot of players just, oh, you know what, I just don't feel like it. I'm just gonna, take the fine and not do this. So that would be the issue of enforcement. But that being said, once it becomes a custom, once it becomes a practice, then players and reporters can better build those relationships. And I think that that's really, really important, so that's, you're seeing these guys after every single game, they're seeing that you're there and you build up that trust. That being said, then when somebody, maybe in a locker room situation is vulnerable and shares something about their family, who they play for, like you can't then turn and weaponize it against the player. That's not right, and that certainly doesn't help. But I think that would be a huge benefit, especially, and I was going to bring this up, in some leagues where they've been very stingy in terms of access, like the WNBA has had a lot of issues with just regular media access to reporters. So I really like that idea, and I think that that would help a lot of things just in general, hopefully diffusing some tension and also providing an opportunity to build relationships and conversations with players after good games, after bad games, and all the in between.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it comes back around to the load management, what we led the show with. Is it an issue of load management, or is it an issue of whether he's actually injured? And I think that's the feeling now, is that he's just legit injured, and
Yeah.
and so
Just say that.
why just go ahead and say that. And I guess maybe that the argument for the team is that we don't want to admit that that he's injured. We want him to play it that way, and that's all part of what you were getting at with your with your point. Sorry. And I think the other issue here is just, I think the one thing the three of us can all agree on is that what was written was not appropriate. And you wonder in this time and an age of journalism, always when something like this comes up, is that something that is happening because let's face it, it's newspapers are desperately trying to get attention in some way, and clickbait is something that we've talked about a lot on this program over the years. And yeah, I mean, that may have been a piece of it. We'll never know whether there was any thinking along those lines, but clearly what was written, as you shared with us, is over the line, I think. And it just makes me wonder. I mean, it all makes me, we talk a lot of history on this program, and it all takes me back to maybe the most famous incident of this case. And Kimball, I'm sure you'll remember this well. Shelby probably, it was close to before she was born. But the Mike Gundy incident is just the classic. I'm a man. I'm 40, and that I actually went back and looked up that issue. As the Oklahoma State football coach years ago, he was upset about a young columnist's column, and it was in a very similar way, and just torched her during this press conference. He said, if you want to go after an athlete, one of my athletes, you go after one that doesn't do the right things. You don't downgrade him because he does everything right and may not play as well on Saturday, and you let us make that decision. That's why I don't read the newspaper, because it's garbage. Are you kidding me? Where are we at in society today? Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40. And the only part that ever got played was the "I'm a man. I'm 40." But I think the bigger, more interesting part of that quote that nobody ever remembers is, where are we at in society today? And I think it was the beginning of this idea that newspapers needed to take shots to get people to read. And that was years ago, and obviously things have gotten far worse in the newspaper business since. And it's just it's an issue that I think we're really struggling with now, is to get people to read. This is what we got to do. We got to write things that are going to get attention. And certainly in the case of Joel Embiid, that got attention, but it only got attention because Joel Embiid brought attention to it. And that may be the one mistake that you could lay on at the feet of Joel Embiid is if he doesn't push him, no one ever, this never becomes a story. It's just, that's how quickly it becomes viral. And if there's video of it, oh my gosh, it's even more viral. Anyway,
One of my problems,
Go ahead.
I just want to say one last thing. One of my problems with it is it seems like such a cheap shot, right? Like, because the ideas are not connected,
Right.
Like, if you want to talk about, like, some other issue, like if someone's hypocritical about, like, oh, you say this, and and you have this own issue of your own, but like to bring up that issue, and then it's so not connected to what he's on Joel Embiid's case for,
Right.
right? That seems like it seemed like such a cheap shot.
It's a very, very tenuous connection that clearly I think was made, as a means of gaining some attention.
Right.
All right, let's move on to point number 2. The scout, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Here you go. Well, Shelby, I don't know if you know or don't know how I feel about Bill Belichick. Again, you might have listened to episodes 1, 7, 11, 54, 61,
Oh,
72.
it's so
I've
many
talked
more
about
than that. So many more than that. 96% of our episodes you have talked about the Patriots one way or the other, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, whatever.
No, no, but Mr. Belichick, so I hate him, Shelby, but I don't really hate him. Again, I have made a point here before that there's this thing called sports hate, where I don't really hate Bill Belichick. I don't know Bill Belichick. I hate the sports image of Bill Belichick or what the impact he's had on my sporting life as a long suffering and still to this day very much suffering Jet fan, and what he did to our Jets, and the whole horrible New England. I live in New England, and I had to live with the last 25 years of Belichick. But guess what? I actually love him now. I love Bill Belichick. I really, really do. I'm not kidding. I would and it brings up kind of what you're talking about with the media and like different ideas, like expectations. Because one of the reasons I hated him is like, what a dork. I'm trying to think of the right word. We just decided we're a PG broadcast, so I didn't want to say a different word.
Right.
But all right, with PG, I think I can say 13. I can say what a dick he was to the media. Like, come on, talk about like you want us to be like reasonable with you. Be reasonable with us. Give us some answer to this question on some mumbling nonsense.
On to Cincinnati.
But but of course now, Bill Belichick, the broadcaster, is a great listen. And I don't know if either of you have listened to him at all, but I really like him. Now, look, he's still very wooden. He's still kind of like low energy, but I kind of like that because it feels like, all right, that's him. Unlike Tom Brady, another guy I've talked about a few times here, who's in his broadcasting career, who seems very sort of fake in how he's trying to be, But Bill Belichick is just sort of like, okay, this is me now. And guess what? I'm not afraid to say stuff. And I've talked about this as a guy who coaches myself, that you don't always want to, you can't always tell everything in media. You don't have to spill every bit of information. So Bill Belichick was always guarded, but he was too guarded. But now we're actually getting some of the brilliance out of his mind, and we're getting to hear some of this stuff. And it's really enjoyable. He's saying stuff. There's this, Pat McAfee show, which is such a goofy show, but
God,
I've seen Bill Belichick.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
I know, but I watched him on there for like 45 minutes straight. And in a way, McAfee, of course, no great journalist, was a perfect guy to sort of bring him out, because it'd be like, hey, what about this coach? And Belichick was sort of like giving up stuff about what he thought about this player, this team, this idea, this strategy. And my favorite thing that I've seen Belichick do is he's on the show called Inside the NFL, which Tim and I remember as like this classic old show with Charlie Jones and Len Dawson. Tim, is that right? And
You're
it's
older
gone
than
through
I am.
a
I don't
million. Come on, you remember that? It's gone through a million changes, and it was the driest show before, just two guys sitting in a studio with some clips. And the new version of that is some wacky semi-Pat McAfee type show, but Belichick is on it. And the best thing about it, again, as a guy who looks and is fascinated by coaches, is you get to feel what it's like to have Bill Belichick as a coach and why he was such a great coach. And there's a segment where he's like in front of the three other guys on the show, and he's like going through some things about like going through highlights and how to protect the ball. And he's like saying very coachy things like, what is ball security, guys? Job security. Like he makes them answer, like, the famous, like, and what is this, guys? And they all have to say that prompt. He gives them a prompt and they answer back. And he did the same thing when he was going over how to stop the San Francisco rushing attack. And he was like saying, now you got to get back. And it's just so awesome. It's like you really finally get some insight into what made him a great coach. And for me, I love that. It might not be for everyone. They might want a more like shiny, peppy version of a broadcaster. But I love listening to him. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, you're right that that he's not. I mean, he's definitely not shiny. But I think you go back to all of the points you've made over the years, and it kind of makes me crazy that you have just turned so quickly, that you've just accepted after all of the pain and agony that he's put us through. And I don't mean just putting you through as a Jets fan, but putting us through as media people who have struggled with him for all of these years. The idea that you're just like, oh, okay, it's fine now. I forgive him. I just can't do it. I can't do
don't think I
it.
said
I
I
can't
forgive
go
him.
there. I mean, I feel the
forgive
same
him.
way about Nick Saban. I mean, we're just evil. We're the evil empire all these years. And then all of a sudden he goes on College Game Day and it's just yucking it up with the boys. And everybody thinks, oh, wow, it's so great. Like, look at it. Look, his personality's coming out. I agree that it's nice. It is nice to get inside the heads of these guys, but man, I'm not as easy to forgive as you are. I just feel like all those years where these guys just stifled us and just tried to make our jobs miserably hard. I can't just all of a sudden say, oh, okay, great. I forgive you for all of that. I don't know. How do you feel about it, Shelby?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting dichotomy where, like, I think you have a lot of just coaches that move between, or coaches, former players that move between the, media space and the actual, I guess, sport, whether it's coaching on the sideline or playing on the field, court, etc. And they seem to bring that same personality, a sense of authenticity. And then there's some, like you said, with Tom Brady, where just in one space it feels fake. I think, from what I've heard, and it's not a lot, but I've also enjoyed a little bit of what, Bill Belichick has done. But at the same time, I kind of agree with Tim that there is some sort of sentiment of like, okay, yeah, like this guy seems likable, but where was this
When
on
we
the other,
needed it.
right? Like, or I'm just trying to think of like some examples that are more kind of recent memory. I think I look at, for instance, the difference between Mac Brown and, Hubert Davis, right? Where Mac very much, you can tell that he was on the media side of things and he always likes to bring it up and, oh, I was in the media, so I get it, and da-da-da-da. Whereas, and, I say this with full respect, but just getting to know and interview, Hubert Davis over the years, I look back at some of his old, broadcast clips and I'm thinking, where did this go?
Right.
Like, where
Exactly.
did this go? And now he, I don't know, and you get the big laugh and the smile sometimes, but most of the time, like, very serious and can be very closed off with some questions. And it feels, and I don't know if it's a result of media training or anything, but yeah, you flip between that media role and then you're on the other side and suddenly it's very you can be a little bit more guarded, a little bit more tight-lipped. And I just wish that wasn't the case. And that's not just with Coach Hubert Davis. I think there's a lot of other folks that you see that happening with.
Yep.
One person that I did want to shout out that I think has done a really incredible job. I've really enjoyed everything that I've seen from Cam Newton and what he's done. Just hopping on First Take and different just broadcast opportunities brings a ton of personality, and it feels genuine because you saw that with him as a player. Like, this is the guy that's, for a period of time when I was in middle school, not to age myself,
Ouch.
made Charlotte in North Carolina like super cool and was dabbing and everything. And I know that sometimes a little bit the flamboyance and the hats and the suits, it's not everyone's jam, but I think he just brings a super genuine energy, and you saw that as a player, and you see that carry over into just the personality with which he speaks. And he brings a lot of analysis. He can relate things to certain examples from when he was a player, and I have really enjoyed that because, and I'm not to say that what Belichick is doing feels disingenuine, but very guarded, was very, antagonistic to the media, and then all of a sudden is, bubbly and speaking with all these, I don't know, doing all the coach speak and little gimmicks and things. It doesn't feel genuine to those who have kind of been on the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference. I mean Cam Newton is just being himself.
Right.
That's my gripe with this thing is that, all right, who is Bill Belichick? Is he really this more colorful guy, and he was just being a jerk all those years just because he was trying to protect his team? Yeah, then if that's the case, it's I get it, but I also think again I can't forgive and forget that quickly that these guys were basically just doing everything they can to keep us from doing our job, and now all of a sudden they say, "Oh, I love the media, and now I'm part of the media, and I'm cashing checks as being part of the media." I don't know. I have a hard time with that. But yeah, Cam Newton is just. I haven't seen very much of his shtick on the air yet, but I'll never be upset with him for just continuing to be himself, and yeah, I mean obviously he is an icon here in the neighborhood, and I'm rooting for him for sure.
Wow, who knew that I was the one with the open, forgiving heart?
I know, exactly. You're usually the most hard-hearted bastard we have on the podcast, and I'm usually the hopeless romantic. But yeah, no,
I think that's beautiful.
When it comes to media, I that's where my guard comes up. I just can't take it. All right, I think we're ready to move on to point number 3. We don't want to get too long-winded here. We want our listenership to hang with us, and those of you who have listened for years know that I'm all about the quiz as the professor, and so I've got a little quiz for my fellow Potters here, and it has to do with this being college hoops opening day. Thank God we finally gotten here. This is the promised land. And so tonight we get it rolling, and we'll get it rolling with this question.
Let's get it.
Other than the UCLA dynasty, obviously, which is the outlier of all college basketball history, so we're going to push that to the side for now. Mm-hmm. How many programs have won consecutive NCAA titles? How many programs have won consecutive NCAA titles? Any
men's basketball?
Men's basketball.
Men's college hoops.
Yeah.
Well,
you guys can just, anything you can think of, throw it out there.
UConn.
I'm going to say 2.
2. Who are they?
Oh, well, no, 3 now because we UConn. I'm going to say 3. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So who are they?
It's Florida, Duke, and UConn.
Okay. Those are the recent ones. Yes, you are good on that.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the recent ones. But if you go back, there are also Oklahoma State, 45-46 under Henry Iba, 48-49. Shelby was there for these.
Right.
Adolph Rupp.
Can't believe
Kentucky,
I forgot
48-49.
Oh,
I'm not that old.
I actually didn't see any of
I should have
these.
gotten Rupp.
Bill Russell,
Right.
San Francisco, 55-56.
Oh, right.
And then Cincinnati, believe it or not, without Oscar Robertson involved, even though he was there right before they won the 2, 1961-62. So the answer is 6, other than UCLA, have won consecutive championships. Now, how many of those 3? I didn't share the potential third championship that they might have won. How many programs have won 3 in a row, other than UCLA?
I want to say 9, but I don't think that.
I'm going to say none.
I'm going to say none as well.
That is correct.
Okay.
0 teams have won 3 other than the UCLA dynasty until this year.
See, yeah, because I thought that's the whole shtick is that UConn's going to do
this year. Mm-hmm. I'm coming out it's what we do on 3-Point Range. We make predictions that are long-term predictions that hopefully people will forget when we get them wrong. That's our goal here. And so here's my first prediction on 3-Point Range 2.0, that UConn and Dan Hurley will be the first team since John Wooden to win 3 consecutive championships. Now, I don't think it's any secret for those of you who are regular listeners to 3 Point Range that I have a man crush on Danny Hurley.
Yes.
The man, I think he is far and away the best coach in college basketball now. I've spoken to a couple people who are of a previous generation from mine who know a lot about sports, and they talk about how that's the way everyone looked at John Wooden back in the day, is that it was John Wooden, and then it was everybody else, and there just wasn't anybody else that you could really compare him to. And I think that's, in my mind, that's kind of the case. That's kind of the case right now. I mean, I look around the country and I think, who are the coaches who you can put up side by side against Dan Hurley? Which brings up another question: what other active coaches have won 2 championships? And Dan Hurley's done it in the last 2 years. But any other active coaches have won 2 championships? Anybody?
I'm going to say no. Oh, no, Bill Self.
Bill Self, correct. That's the one and only Bill Self. But if Dan Hurley were to get this 3rd one, we would be talking about how many coaches. This is the last question on our test. Extra credit. How many coaches have won 3 national championships? Not even consecutively. I'll just, other than
Roy. Right?
Roy, Krzyzewski, Wooden. We're counting Wooden now, right?
Yeah.
We're not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That might be it. I don't know.
Does it have to be
Roy,
the same
Krzyzewski,
school?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Pitino only won 2, though, I think.
Yep. I believe you've gotten them except for Robert Montgomery Knight, right?
Oh, that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the only people who've won, who he would trail, who Danny Hurley would trail on the list if he wins his 3rd this year, would be John Wooden, Mike Krzyzewski, and Adolph Rupp. That's it. Those are the only 3 coaches who have won more than 3 championships. I just look at what Hurley's done, and I was just thinking today, well, if I make a point about how they're going to win the 3rd championship, I should be ready to just rip off all the great players that he's got coming back this year. And I thought to myself, you know what? Just as on day 1 of the season, I don't know all the great players that are coming back for UConn. I know Alex Karaban's coming back. I know a couple of the other names. But I think one of the beauties of Bobby Hurley is that, ask yourself this question: what players could you name off of last year's championship team or the year before that? How many players could you name? I mean, I tried to think about it myself, and the only one I could name off of last year's, just off the top of my head, and part of this is because my brain has started to crumble, but Donovan Clingan is the only player I could name off of last year's team. I mean, I remember them. I remember watching them. I remember the most beautiful college basketball I have ever seen in the history of my long life. Was that 30-0 run against Illinois in the Elite Eight, a very good team that they just completely discombobulated for 8 minutes and ran off a 30-0 run against a good team. And I think to myself, the last 2 years, Danny Hurley has won championships without even being threatened in any game for 2 years. Even these guys who won all these championships, how many of them can you say, well, there wasn't really even a close game in either one of those 2 years? And now I'm not saying that's going to happen again. I don't know. But I'm saying that he doesn't have to have massive stars at every position to make it happen. He is just the best combination of motivation and talent. I'm not saying he hasn't had talent, but he doesn't have Cooper Flagg or RJ Davis this year. I mean, he's got Alex Karaban, who's a very good player. That's probably his star. And I still think he's going to win the national title because I believe in who he is. I think the only person who can stop Danny Hurley from winning the national championship this year is Danny Hurley. Because Danny Hurley, as we all know, is a bit of a high wire act. He's had his issues. He yells at people in the crowd. He's had his moments, and so there's always that chance that he could just spontaneously combust, and all of a sudden, we don't have him anymore. And I'm not saying he's dying or anything, but just that something could happen, and
just get ejected.
It could be, he could be. He could be.
That was exactly the follow-up I was going to say. Is my gut is, everything you say is true about the program and stuff like that, but my gut feeling is, and we both know his dad a bit,
Yeah.
have interacted with his father, legendary high school coach Bob Hurley, Sr., and we've seen his act, and I wrote that word down, like, to be ready to talk about, like, I think he might implode, and that, as you said, that could be something that gets in their way. But I will also say that, that it's a beautiful program. I do know an assistant coach for St. John's. When I saw him a couple of months ago, he talked about, like, he described their offense as a symphony. And he also said that, he had coached against Hurley before and that it never was quite like that. So I don't know where that came from, and that's fascinating. And one last thing is I will plug that I plan to expand our writing platform again and get back to sort of being a journalist and hopefully talk to some local college coaches in my area and just write about more the X's and O's. It's going to be very dry, not going to be for everybody. There'll be no talking about their personal lives, and I hope to not get shoved by any players or coaches. But I do plan to explore. I've talked to some of the local coaches already, and it'll be interesting to get some other thoughts on these things because I do think the college basketball game is a fascinating game when it comes to X's and O's.
Are you going to reach out to Danny Hurley? Are you going to reach out to Danny Hurley?
I was looking at their schedule, and they come to Providence, where I live, March 1st, so that's tricky. If they came earlier, and maybe I get on the road and head to UConn and get to a game there, we'll see. But they play he's loaded up his schedule. It feels like they play every game at home this year. It's ridiculous. They go on the road a little bit.
No wonder they're so good.
Scared. Yeah, no wonder. No, but obviously they played great in the tournament. So Shelby, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I like the whole idea about, the only thing getting in the way of Dan Hurley is Dan Hurley. I mean, there's, incident after incident with like you mentioned, there was the incident in the St. John's game interacting with a fan. I think there was also some sort of Creighton incident in that game, if you remember.
That's the game they lost last year, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen very often.
Right, exactly. So he is, Hurley's the definition, what kids our age will call a crash out. Just, crazy kind of temper.
First time that word's come up on this podcast.
There you go.
Yep. 101 episodes.
So
Can you define that for
a crash out. I mean, I'll get you all the Urban Dictionary definition here. But
we never use the Urban Dictionary on 3PR.
To crash out is to go insane or do something stupid. Basically, like you lose your temper. And so a crash out is somebody who loses their temper. You can use it in both like as a descriptor of somebody, but it can also be like the action of crashing out. That Hurley is known to do that, but it's something that also, again, just reading articles when I can about Hurley, so none of this is obviously my own reporting, but it really does seem to fire players up. I was reading this Jeff Borzello ESPN article about how Caravan said that Hurley is more intense this year. He's leveled up. He's hungrier than ever. And there's also this freshman quote in the article that said that he's probably the funniest person I've ever met on the court. It's just like a mode flips. He's just kill, kill, kill everybody, even in practice. And there are all these great quotes from, it sounds like Borzello was able to go and just watch a practice, and Hurley's, yelling at the guys about that's not a expletive closeout. That's embarrassing. Low level expletive. I mean, he is getting on these guys.
And
who
how
just
does
won
he get
back-to-back
away with that? I mean, I think other coaches would tell you they can't do that anymore.
Right.
I mean, that's what's amazing to me is that he's coaching old school. He's like, he's telling them what he really thinks, and he's berating them at times, and
Cursing players out.
That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, in the world of the transfer portal, I mean, you got to be. I think coaches think all the time. If I say that, is the guy going to transfer? I mean, but somehow Hurley gets away with it. How does he get away with it?
I don't.
Right. Well,
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, exactly. Maybe that's exactly what's going to happen. But I forget in our 101 episodes if I brought this up before, but I coach high school basketball, and one year I was, my AD was on my case for being a little hard on the kids, and I remember that, and we were having a rough season. I remember that winter I had met Bob Hurley Sr. at a basketball camp, and he had said, "Come down and practice anytime you want." And so that winter break, I'm like struggling as a coach, and I go down in one of his or two of his practices. And here I am getting flack for being hard on my players. He literally was challenging his players to fight him. He's like, "I'll give you the first swing." And I go back and like, well, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. And talk about a different era. I mean, man.
Yeah. No. I mean, that is another one of my concerns with him. I mean, obviously he has gotten away with 1980s, 70s, 60s. I mean, I don't know if it's quite Bob Knight level, but just the kind of stuff that he gets away with clearly is not something that most coaches are most of them are probably too scared to go there, and I can kind of understand why.
I mean, I think also when you have a certain level of dominance, players are more willing to buy into it. Like I mean, if this guy is cursing us out like this and we're getting blown out every game, I'm not standing for that. But if you really have a trust and a buy-in to his system, which I think is what has propelled him to the success, then you're kind of willing to put up with some of that because that's obviously it's motivating, it's working in a sense. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the key to Hurley and UConn and just what they've been able to do in terms of their success. And that's not to, I mean, I just want to be clear, not to say that they don't have, stars and very talented players, but it's more about this just motion offense, kind of like movement-based system that they have built around just ball screens, cutting, quick decision-making. It's a really layered action kind of offense, just developed around all these if-then principles, if that makes sense. Like, if this breaks down, if this happens, I know to do X, I know to do Y. It's just a very high IQ, very just complicated offense that if you have talented players that can buy in and really perform within that system, that's all you need. You don't need the RJ Davis or Hunter Dickinson, still not sure how he's still in college or what have you, right? Like, but that being said, I mean, somebody like a Caravan, and Hurley's called him the brain center of the team, really high basketball IQ. Like, that's all you need are just really, really smart players who are bought in and can perform. I mean, I remember just watching the UConn UNC game at Madison Square Garden, and this was last season. It was insane, actually, to see in person. I'm not going to sit here and pull some LeBron and say, like, I knew right then they were going to go on to repeat, right? Like, I'm not going to BS y'all on that. But that being said, I mean, it was different than any other team that you saw, and not saying that there wasn't anything UNC could do in that game, but having heard just interviews that Baycott's done since then, describing that offense and how different it is, I mean, you just have to watch it to like truly understand, but there's so little that you can do to defend it because it's just such a well-oiled machine, again, because of all those if-then principles. It's like they have a plan B, plan C, plan D on offense. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's, again, it doesn't really matter as much the personnel. It's just a matter of how well can defenses adapt. Can they catch UConn on a off night, a bad night? And that will determine their success. Also, whether or not there's some untimely, ejection from Dan Hurley. But I'm more or less, proffering that as a joke more than any like kind of serious prediction.
Well, after that soliloquy, I think that we might just dedicate future 3-point ranges to you and Kimball to sitting around breaking down basketball
Please.
X's and O's, because obviously we've got another future coach in the ranks. Shelby is an accomplished intramural basketball player here at UNC.
Please, no.
I mean,
don't say that.
it's not surprising that she's got the full breakdown.
Batty shot o'clock. We play at 7 p.m. on Thursday. Come check us out.
Kimball, you going to be there? Maybe you could come coach them.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you got on this topic, Kimball?
No, I think we're good.
I think we're good. Yeah. A couple shout outs here as we wrap it up.
Yes.
To one of our new listeners. I promised one of our new listeners, her name is Celia. Some of us know her well. She is currently pirating this show off of her brother's Spotify account.
That's awesome.
And she may soon be the director of the PR director of 3-Point Range. I'm trying to recruit her. So shout out to her. And actually a sincere shout out to Sarah Ellis, who is our brilliant new executive producer,
Yes.
Without whom there would be no 3-Point Range, and I kid you not. It is her talent that somehow will make us sound way better than we actually are. And final shout out, of course, to Pete Best, wherever you are. So it's been a pleasure. And so for the Scout, Kimball Crossely, and Shelby Ringo Swanson, I'm the Professor, Tim Crothers, pulling up from the logo. Good